you started the service, Sherry, with the acknowledgement of the colonial nature of our country on indigenous land, because the situation in Israel, I believe, is a colonial settler state as well, and that we as a people, as joint peoples, in our solidarity with indigenous people, have an obligation to be in solidarity both here and there. Part of the problem for the United Church and for Jews has been, I think, the misconstruction of the understanding of the state of Israel and the rights of Palestinians as a conflict between Jews and Muslims. And it's not. It never has been. It's a conflict between justice and injustice. There have always been Palestinian Jews and Christians, and there are many Muslims that on the full range of issues, but we collectively stand for justice. I want to start by acknowledging the long history of the United Church of Canada's leadership on this issue. And I understand, I agree with Sherry, that it's not the entire church, just as, you know, in the Jewish community there are divisions as well. But A.C. Forrest, the United Church Observer editor, played a major role in opening up the issue of Palestinian rights post the 1967 conquest of the West Bank, and the United Church Observer continues to be an important voice for the world, not just for the church. In 1972, the Observer published an article saying how Zionists manipulate your news, for which it was castigated brutally. In 1988, the United Church launched an important study of Christian anti-Semitism, and in 2003, General Council adopted Bearing Faithful Witness, which was a really important initiative to ask the church to reflect on and heal the long history of anti-Semitism that had polluted the Christian movements from the beginning, and the United Church was at the leadership of that. At that point, the United Church partnered with the Canadian Jewish Congress. The problem with that is that the Canadian Jewish Congress was claiming to represent all Jews, and the Canadian Jewish Congress had a perspective which was that all Jews equal Israel, and any criticism of Israel equals anti-Semitism. So this put the United Church in a difficult position. So I'm not going to take a lot of time going through this. I just want to say that the church has continued in 2006, 2009, and 2012 to more progressively, more and more address this issue of how do we support the rights of Palestinians without being anti-Semitic. And in each case, the United Church has gotten viciously attacked by the Israel lobby. So in 2006, my friend Marjorie Robertson called me. She was a member of a United Church member, and she said, there is this resolution coming up at the General Council meeting, and the Canadian Jewish Congress is attacking the church. What can Jews say about this who don't support that position? So as Ronnie mentioned, I mobilized about 25 of the progressive Jewish groups across Canada, all of which were small and isolated and not talking to each other, often in conflict. And what we did was put together a statement. I also got international people, and a booklet that went to the General Council to say that we are Nionists, which means that what Israel does is not in our name. Nionists, not Zionists. It didn't work. In 2012, well, actually, I think in 2010, Njepi was formed. Do y'all know what Njepi is? Anybody not know? It's the United Network for Justice and Peace in Palestine and Israel, which is a United Church initiative. In 2012, the General Council endorsed the Kairos call for a boycott of Israel, and at that point, the Canadian Jewish Congress announced it was boycotting the United Church of Canada. We said, as independent Jewish voices, we're glad to partner with the United Church of Canada, and we applaud what it does. We really appreciate what the United Church has done with the Unsettling Goods campaign and with Barbara Lloyd's Let's Talk promotions and all the other work that's coming up from General Council in support of Palestinian rights. This is an act of great courage, and as the most progressive and the largest Protestant denomination in Canada, the United Church's voice makes a huge difference. So I want to tell you a little bit about how we've worked together. As Ronnie mentioned, in 2008, we formed IJV, and in 2009, and 2012, we supported the United Church's boycott resolutions and issued statements as an alternative to the Canadian Jewish Congress and eventually to the Canadian Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. We also, I was the only Jew at the founding conference of Njapi. Our continual voice as independent Jewish voices is to say, criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic, or criticizing injustice is not anti-Semitic. Of course, you can criticize Israel in an anti-Semitic way, but you don't do that. So at 10 years, the United Church has made a huge difference for us, and we have continued to flourish. We are now the largest Canadian Jewish-Palestinian solidarity organization in Canada. We have over 700 members, 5,000 on the email list, and 10,000 social media followers, and we have moved into the mainstream. We were the first Jewish national organization in the world to endorse the Palestinian call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions in 2009. And we have developed strong solidarity links, not just with the United Church, but with a whole range of churches, unions, student groups, Palestinian groups, indigenous groups, and so on. And we have many achievements. I'm not sure you want to hear all the achievements. I just want to mention two. Right now there's a long list here, but I'm not going to ask you to read them all. One is that we had a major role collectively with church members in derailing the Canadian Parliamentary Coalition to Combat Anti-Semitism, which was not a parliamentary initiative. It was individual MPs who were trying to shove through a definition of anti-Semitism that would criminalize support for Palestinians. We derailed that one at that time. We basically challenged all the research on which it was being based and proved it was phony. But I just want to mention that that fight continues, that the Center, CJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, which took over from the Canadian Jewish Congress, is now trying to shove through a similar definition of anti-Semitism, again, which will make it criminally part of the hate speech to support boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and to support Palestinian rights. So we're part of the campaign to challenge the legitimacy of that. We hope you will too. The second thing I want to mention is you may have heard about our Stop the JNF campaign. And the Jewish National Fund, which was founded in 1901 to buy and then support the violent expropriation of Palestinian land and take it over for Jewish use only. The Jewish National Fund has continued to be part of enforcing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, both in the West Bank and in mainstream Israel. Anyway, we have launched a challenge to the Canada Revenue Agency, asking them to remove the Jewish National Fund's charitable status. They collect $15 million, which is subsidized by our tax dollars every year. Outside, after the service, I'd appreciate it if you would pick up one of our flyers and just go to the website on the back and sign the petition, asking for the same thing. And also there's postcards with a picture of Al-Araqib, which is a Palestinian community which has been destroyed over 50 times by the Israeli Defense Forces. And whereas it's got the same demand on it. If you would sign that postcard, you can send it for free or just leave it there and I'll mail them in. So I want to tell you, I've only got a few more minutes. I don't want to eat up all your time. The bad news, I said this is going to be a good news thing, but it's important to start with the bad news. The bad news is that the Israeli government is escalating its stranglehold over Palestinians. This past year, it passed 18 new laws which will cement its control over Palestinians, and it wipes out Arabic as a second language. It makes it much harder for the Supreme Court to support Palestinian rights, and it's pretty awful. Essentially, the two-state option, if it ever was a possibility, is completely gone. And as Richard Falk has mentioned, the apartheid state is completely entrenched now. Gaza is particularly in trouble. It's virtually uninhabitable since the illegal blockade was put in place. It's a humanitarian disaster with over 97% of its water undrinkable. And so there needs to be urgent action. Every week, people in Gaza go to the border to protest nonviolently, and every week, thousands of them get shot, many of them killed. One of the other challenges is that, of course, in the Trump era, we are facing other world crises and climate change, and all of those things distract us from the urgent situation of Palestinians, which has become, I think it's important not to say, oh, we should be concerned about Aboriginal rights, or we should be concerned about Palestinian rights, or we should be concerned about climate change. They're all connected. And Palestinian rights are in some ways a flashpoint. As Jeff Halper, a Jewish activist in Israel, has said, we are all now Palestinians. The weapons that are being developed in Israel with US and Canadian support are literally being used to control our people. So I'm just going to, I want to talk a little bit about the good news. I'll go through more bad news. There are hopeful trends. The BDS movement, the stuff I was saying about the bad news is from the top down, the brutality is escalating. From the bottom up, the movements are growing dramatically. Young people are supporting the movements. The BDS movement is growing dramatically. In the US, political support is growing for Palestinian rights, and the solidarity movements are all uniting. In Canada as well, we have many groups beginning to take on this struggle. IJV was at the forefront, not only at the United Church of Canada, but with the Green Party pushing through a BDS resolution by over 90%, helping to promote the pro-Palestinian resolution at their last convention, which was kept off the table but got a lot of press. And the Jewish National Fund campaign is growing dramatically since Evan Dyer released his CBC report on it. We did a survey in 2016. I'm not going to go through all the details of it because of time, but just to say that a large proportion, over half in most cases, of Canadians are more supportive of Palestinian rights than they are of the government of Israel. They believe that boycotts of Israel are reasonable and that sanctions of Israel are reasonable, and they oppose Parliament condemning supporters of BDS. So the United Church is now on the correct side of the movement, or that is in the majority. And as well, the question then got raised, well, what do Jews think? Because, again, the Jewish lobby, or the Israel lobby, has persisted in saying it represents the Jewish community and that support for Israel is the requirement for not being anti-Semitic. We did a survey of Canadian Jews this past year, which is just about to be released, which shows that not a majority, but a strong proportion of Jews in Canada hold the same positions as Canadians in general. It's very interesting. Over a third have a negative view of the Israeli government. A third think boycotts of Israel are reasonable and that sanctions, and a fifth think sanctions are reasonable. A third oppose parliamentary condemnations of BDS. 58% say criticism of the Israeli government is not necessarily anti-Semitic, and almost half believe that charges of anti-Semitism are often used to silence legitimate criticism of Israeli government policies. Where am I here? The main division that we found was not by religion, but by politics. Conservatives in general are way more supportive of Israel than anybody else, and similarly in the States, Republicans are more conservative, supportive of Israel. Christian evangelists and the Jewish Zionist right wing are united also in support of Israel, but everybody else is on our side. So I just want to show you the spectrum. This is a chart. Sorry, am I going too fast for you guys? Great. Basically, if you look on, I don't know if you can read it, but on one side is the anti-Zionist extremes, a tiny proportion, and on the other side is the Israel lobby, also a tiny proportion. Initially, we were trying to go head-to-head, and we had no chance of winning. They've got lots of money and lots of power. They've got the media, they've got all the political parties on their side. But what we've done over the last 10 years, both the IJV and the United Church and other Palestine Solidarity people have done, is we have moved support around the spectrum, and now the Israel lobby is on the defensive. It is acting more violently and more abusively because it's scared. They're trying to pass this legislation to stifle criticism because they're scared. 10 years ago, the Israel narrative was completely accepted, and people on our side were tiny, isolated groups who had no voice. Now we are into the mainstream, definitely in the majority of the Canadian government, and well into the Jewish community. So our next challenges are to be proudly visible, because organizing for Palestinians is not anti-Semitic, to keep educating and involving our members, to organize events to show our public support. One of the campaigns that we've done that you guys might consider doing is to raise money to send solar lights to the children of Gaza, because they only have 4 hours of electricity, maybe, for studying. To defend those attacked by the Israel lobby, to grow solidarity links in Canada and Israel and internationally, and most of all, to stay hopeful. Thank you.